So here we go again for another edition of NBL Marketplace, and this is a bumper one. I know I say this all the time, but this is a bumper episode coming your way. Some big signings, and one of the biggest teams in the league has finally locked away their coach. It's all thanks to the great team at Paywise who bring you this episode and every episode of NBL Marketplace. I'm Jack Heverin. Across from me in the Corey Williams studio is Pete Hooley. It's great to see you.
Good to be here. Plenty to talk about. Exciting news. They finally have a coach.
And not with us today in the studio, but live from Turkey is Olgun, ESPN insider. Olgun, great to see you.
Good to see you. I'm here in Turkey for the FIBA Under-17 World Cup. Australia currently 2-0. Luke Paul, the next star, is doing really well. Things are getting a little bit feisty here in Istanbul, but so far, so good out here. Good to join you guys.
And we appreciate that Olgun's got up at about 5:30 in the morning to record this as well. So this is the reason we're doing this is because only moments ago, Olgun, Melbourne United's search for a coach is finally over.
Jacob Chance is joining Melbourne United as his head coach and head of basketball operations for the next 4 seasons. It's a 4-year contract for Jacob Chance, and it's a fascinating turn of events for United, who went through an arduous search for this head coach. Jacob Chance was the top priority. He was the person who United initially tabled an offer to. That was an offer that he declined initially. He was part of the San Antonio Spurs program. He was the head coach of the Austin Spurs, the team's G League affiliate. And the idea for him was to stay within that program and continue to rise. United ultimately went on a search, which we'll talk about, but they ultimately circled back to Jacob Chance, revised their offer a little bit, and they ultimately land Chancey, someone who's regarded as one of the best young head coaches in the NBL. He's widely respected by his peers, by players across Australian basketball. He's part of the Boomers program. So we can't stress enough how important a signing this is, not just for the NBL to get an Australian coach in its ranks, but for Melbourne United to get one of the up-and-coming, one of the rising coaches in Australia, to have him for the next 4 seasons as their head coach and head of basketball operations. Unbelievable coup for United.
Yeah, it's a fascinating timeline how this all played out. We've been following this Melbourne United coaching search since Dean Vickerman departed, or that announcement was. And as Olgun said, he was the number one choice, Jacob Chance. And it makes sense, everything he's achieved now overseas in the San Antonio Spurs G League, all of that. But unfortunately, at the time, it was going to be hard to walk away from. And he's been unbelievable there. And you feel like he's getting closer to his big goal. What do you mean? He's still so young in this journey. So for him to say, no, at the time, I'm not ready to do that, the offer's just not where I need it to be for whatever reason, his personal, yes, you think about everything else that comes to it. And then they had to pivot and go down a different path, and that's where Dave Yeager came into it. They thought that was going to get across the table. We thought that was going to get across the table. And then at this point now, where we're close to July, and Melbourne United turn back to Jacob Chance and say, hey, what's it going to take? And what does help here is that he was clearly their number one choice from the start.
Yes.
We all knew that. He would have known that. But to say, hey, this is something that we're looking at now is like, we want you. We think you whatever it's going to take. And then Chancey, for him to decide that, you know what, yep, this is the path that I want to go to now is huge. It's huge for him to say, this is enough to bring me back home, considering everything that I've achieved so far. So credit to Melbourne United, credit to him. And as Olgun said, this is incredibly exciting for someone so young, who's so well respected, to be back in a place that wanted him so badly. It's so great for the league.
You're both very well connected when it comes to the timeline of this whole thing. So why don't you both kind of step us through the timeline of how this has all played out with Jacob Chance? Because as Pete said, Olgun, in recent weeks on this show, we've said that Melbourne were almost back to square one. So what's changed?
So let's rewind back to around May. Dean Vickerman departs as head coach. We all came together on the marketplace, and we were in agreement that the goal for United should be to target Jacob Chance and to offer him a 5-year deal. But we were also under the impression that probably the best thing for his career is to remain within that San Antonio Spurs coaching pathway. That pipeline is one that is proven. And from what I understand, speaking to people around the NBA, people within the Spurs, from the top down, the San Antonio brass down, we're urging Jacob Chance, hey, don't leave. We really like you here. You're part of this pathway. You're going to continue to climb this ladder. And I think that was one of the things that played a role in him initially declining United's first offer. There was a meeting that took place. The new majority owner for United, Travis Knight, he was in Oklahoma City just to watch basketball games during the Western Conference Finals. Toward the end of May, he had an informal meeting with Jacob Chance. That happened about a week after the team's formal interview with him. So they were targeting him. When he declined the initial offer, That's when they pivoted, as Pete said, as Pete reported initially. Dave Yeager was a target. They flew people out to try to get that deal done. They were confident they would. He ultimately pivoted himself to Paris basketball. And then the process became quite arduous in that we heard a weird array of European names that the team had interested and interviewed. So they were almost scrambling to a point where they were trying to find any high-level coach who might be interested in the position. They interviewed a bunch of them. Ultimately, they pivoted back to Jacob Chance. And from a money perspective, from a year's perspective, from a role perspective, he's not just the head coach, he's the head of basketball operations. They were able to revise that offer to the point where it was palatable and attractive for Jacob Chance to return to United. So for a process that in the middle of it, we were all speaking privately amongst each other that, are they going to get this done? Are they going to find someone high level enough to take over this team that is quite fascinating and led by Joe Ingles and Chris Golding, which is also a fascinating thing to consider. Jacob Chance, 32 years old, taking over a team whose two primary marquee players, or at least primary Australian players, are 37 and 38 respectively. That's also a fascinating thing to keep an eye on this season. But United has a trust that there's a respect that people around Australian basketball have in Jacob Chance, not just in his basketball acumen and his approach, but his ability to be approachable with players. And players have a knack of respecting him as a person while also respecting his basketball acumen and approach.
Yeah, Olgun nailed it. And I'll go back to the start, and because Olgun really nailed the full timeline of events. But speaking to people around Melbourne, when Dean Vickerman, the mutual release was happening, and yes, the first name on the whiteboard goes Jacob Chance. People in Melbourne also were thinking, you kind of don't want to take him away from his goal. That's why he left in the first place. Yeah. This is the goal and the achievement that he wants to get to. He's deserving of this opportunity. It's not like he went over there and struggled. He was phenomenal. And as Olgun said, the Spurs, everyone loved him there. So part of it's like, hey, we're going to offer you because we'd love to bring you back, but don't take it.
We almost don't want to.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's the kind of club that Melbourne United is. That's the kind of person that Chancey's, everybody around is like, we don't want to hold you back, but then he's still the main target. He's still someone that if you want to lead this club forward to where it is after Dean Vickerman, you've learned under Dean Vickerman, you are that guy for us. So to go from that, the initial offer being declined, which makes perfect sense when we're talking about all of this, to get everything across the board, to get enough ticks to have him coming back. And this is just a really, really big moment and a really exciting one because his story of where he's come from and to become one of the most well-respected voices at such a young age, it is truly incredible. And we'll talk more about it over the coming weeks, the seasons. But this is a guy who has just put in the work so early, so much hard work, so much time, not just into the game of basketball itself, but to the people involved in basketball. And that you don't just fall into these kind of respected voices by accident. He's earned every bit of it. And I can't wait to see how he thrives. Because it's like if he thrives. He will thrive. And I just think it's going to be awesome to watch.
It's a good point, Pete, and it's worth going over just his resume quickly. He was a member of the Perth Wildcats under Trevor Gleeson. He was part of Trevor Gleeson's staff when they were winning championships about a decade ago with the Perth Wildcats. He then moved to the Tasmania JackJumpers, and he worked under Scott Roth as his lead assistant in Tasmania. And then he pivoted to Melbourne United to work under Dean Vickerman. So he's worked under a plethora of really high-level coaches that have come through the NBL. He was a part of the Paris Olympics coaching staff with the Australian Boomers. And Brian Goorjian only has good things to say about him. And the thing that I spoke with Reece Carter, Melbourne United assistant, he's an assistant coach here with the Australian Crocs at under 17s. And I asked him about this signing last night during one of the games that we were watching. And he mentioned last preseason, Jacob Chance was more than likely going to the Austin Spurs. So they knew that he was no longer going to be part of Melbourne United as an assistant. But Dean Vickerman was with the Boomers for the FIBA Asia Cup. And so United needed somebody to run their preseason. And Vickerman tasked Jacob Chance with running their preseason for 4 weeks. And if you speak to Reece Carter about this, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing the story, the level of respect that everyone in the building had for the way Jacob Chance approached that preseason is out of this world, to the point where there is a curiosity in this guy's ability to switch on and off, in the sense of switching on and being able to give clear direction. I spoke to a Boomer last year about Jacob Chance. He said he doesn't waste words. And that's something that he's able to bring with his basketball knowledge and intellect and acumen. But then off the court, he's able to switch off and speak to you like a normal person. He's a fascinating mixture between someone who's regarded as a high-level coach, but also a player's coach at the same time. You don't often find that mix. It's usually one or the other. He has both. And at 32, for him to be able to step into both of those roles and do them both effectively, that's something that I think is quite impressive. So the hope is that that can translate to his first full-fledged, full-time job as an NBL coach in Australia, in the NBL. And his goal is to continue to climb not just the NBA pathway, but that Boomers pathway. He wants to be part of that Australian national team for years and years to come.
And isn't it great, Pete, that so often when there's a coaching role, a lot of our fans say, why can't that be an Australian? Why does that have to be an American? Why do they have to go to a European coach? Now we've got not only an Australian, but probably the best young Australian coach available coaching one of the biggest teams.
Well, I think we always knew it was going to happen at some point. The teams would start to chase. And when he was an assistant coach under Dean Vickerman at Melbourne, you kind of thought, okay, there's the pathway there. But then, again, I keep going back to his time with the Spurs. I mean, it was only 12 months, but how quickly he got in there and was well revered by everybody, and the success that he had, that just doesn't happen by accident. So to be able to bring him back and have that Australian flavour, I think it's huge. And again, just get to sit back and watch. And again, now turns the attention to the team.
Yeah, so what's next with the team?
Well, Olgun mentioned it too. So the basketball operations, so he's going to build this team now. And obviously not just for now, it's a 4-year deal, but he's going to have a lens over all of that, of how it's going to continue to build for times gone by. And he understands they lost a couple of championship series. How do we get back to the top there? We know he's got Chris Gold and he's got Joe Ingles, but he's going to be the main person involved with that, with the new ownership, mind you, with Travis Knight coming in and what he said about how they're going to be approaching things now. This is a really, really exciting time, because getting Jacob Chance over the line now after having a decline, that doesn't happen by accident. So credit to Travis Knight, the ownership group, everybody, Nick Chilson involved with Melbourne United to get that. And now the direction of what they're willing to do, what they're willing to do around the club, things are in a really, really good direction. It's going to start with Chancey.
And I'm off to America shortly. I fly out today. I will be seeing Jacob Chance at Summer League. That is the next step for him. He will be part of Melbourne United. He starts the job today. We're recording this on a Monday. He starts the job today. He will head to Summer League. They will be seeking 3 imports. Yes, they have 3 players who could theoretically be marquee in Joe Ingles, Chris Golding, Sam Wardenberg, but they are pursuing 3 imports. And Jacob Chance leads that. And from a basketball operations standpoint, he did bits and pieces of that in Tasmania when he was with the JackJumpers. He did bits of that with United and also with the Austin Spurs. So he has experience through the years of that operations role. So he's not stepping into this blindly. But the next step for Jacob Chance and United is NBA Summer League. All eyes are toward who they can recruit out there.
We'll talk Summer League before the end of this show as well. We'll start to have a little look towards that. Let's move to the Sydney Kings. We keep bringing up Jaylin Galloway. Every marketplace that we've done in the last 2 months, Jaylin Galloway's name keeps coming up. And we keep getting messages from Sydney Kings fans saying, why are you talking about him? Why are you talking about him? Because he's with us. So I'll just ask you both again. Is Jaylin Galloway going to be with the Sydney Kings for NBL 27?
From what I know, as of today, Jaylin Galloway will be a member of the Sydney Kings for the 2026-27 NBL season. The reason we continued to talk about it, the reason we persisted, is because other teams were persisting. There was a sense that he might be available, and there were enough teams out there in the NBL who were thinking, all right, we can go and get him. And if they're thinking that, then we, I think, have an obligation to talk about it. But now, from the sounds of it, the Sydney Kings will keep him under contract. He will stay for a final season. We'll see what happens beyond that. But this is the final year of one of his lower paying deals. He signed a 3-year deal. So this is the final year of that deal. He'll effectively join the playing roster in the middle of the season because of a shoulder injury. But he is part of the Sydney Kings. He's been there for 7 or 8 seasons now, won a bunch of championships. But from what I understand, as of now, all the teams that were pursuing him, they're under the impression now that he's more than likely, with 99% certainty, staying with the Sydney Kings.
Yeah, and one of those main teams we spoke about was Cairns, right?
Yes.
So, and that's the kind of thing you kind of weigh up. But teams had to wait and see what would happen. It's not like you can start trying to convince him and doing all that, because he's contracted to the Sydney Kings to try and get him across the line. And you just wonder if, as Olgun mentioned, we've seen it reported, he's out for half the season. And you wonder if that injury is part of all of this thinking now too. Do I want to push really hardly on getting a release here, going somewhere else? I'm sitting out half the season anyway. We're doing all the rehab. But yes, it seems like he's going to end up playing for the Sydney Kings, joining them late, hopefully coming back healthier and stronger, because he's still so young in his career. And we saw little glimpses of it again, how good this guy can be. And I really think he's a star for the future.
Their depth chart, we're just seeing it on screen now for those who are watching as opposed to listening on the podcast. There's a gap at the starting centre, or that could be Kelly Pepe, who made his return via NBL 1 on the weekend as well. So there's not much left for the Kings to do here, is there?
It's really just that center spot, whether that is someone like Harry Wessels, who is someone who we have flagged, whether that's ultimately an import that they go and get. But the last time we spoke, it was, I think, a day prior to Torrey Craig re-signing with the Sydney Kings. And we sort of flagged that toward the end of the episode that something might be coming. That was Torrey Craig. And then ultimately the 36ers were pursuing him. John Jenkins signed with the 36ers, so their roster is complete. But the Sydney Kings roster is largely complete. It was, and the priorities were locking in Kendrick Davis, locking in McQuatch Malawach, and can we keep Torrey Craig? They're able to do all three of those things. Did they lose some of their depth in Jaylin Galloway getting injured, Kwatnoi moving on, no Tim Suarez, which we were aware of. We knew that he'd be off to Japan. They've absolutely lost some depth there. Can they make up for it? In one, Kelly Pepe coming back in. I think he can slot into that starting center spot. And what sort of insurance can they also get at the 5 spot? Because I think just Kelly Pepe, while I think we all value him as a player, I think having some added size and maybe someone who's done it before, maybe some experience, a different look at that 5 spot. Can it be Jason Spurgeon? I'm fascinated to see where they pivot, if they ultimately do get Harry Wessels, or if they use that final import spot.
And we'll talk a bit about the end with the spending numbers as well that have come out recently, right? They're always a fascinating thing for people. The rules are in place to take advantage of them to the best way possible. Sydney Kings have done that. I'll see Adelaide do that as well. But bringing Kendrick Davis back on his deal now, as Olgun reported as well, with Xavier Cooks. They've got $2 million players there. You've got Matthew Dellavedova, marqueable player there as well. Torrey Craig signs a deal. I know the Adelaide offer was bigger than that, but that's not going to be a cheap deal either. McQuatch Malawach got a nice little bump up as well. It's a lot of money right there heavily on the front end of your superstar players, which you needed to bring back. You needed to bring back that core. There's a lot of reasons to be excited. Those last couple of pieces will be crucial as well, but it'll be a very fascinating watch to see, do they go down that Harry Wessels route and say, hey, we're going to keep the import spot up for grabs again. We're going to keep that. We trust Kelly. I think Kelly's more than capable of starting. He looks in great shape since he's come back as well.
Always looks in great shape.
Always does, but considering a guy
bigger arms than the three of us combined.
To be out for so long with an ACL, but so there's that role. But do we just see where we need the help later in the season? That's have success doing that in the past. That'll be something to watch for the Sydney Kings. When you've got Kendrick Davis, when you've got Torrey Craig, you've got Xavier Cooks and Delhi, you're already in a pretty good position to begin.
There's no one that has been more excited about the JackJumpers than Pete Hooley. So much so that I think it wouldn't shock me if Pete was driving the Spirit of Tasmania in the lead up to round 1. They're getting better and better. If you believe in off-season winners, Pete, the JackJumpers are the winner of the off-season.
Are they?
I think so. But they've just signed Dakota Matthias.
Yep.
We've spoken about the need for more shooting. He comes in and will shoot the lights out alongside David Johnson. This roster looks really, really good.
It does, doesn't it, Jay?
Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? I think it was, what was it, one of game 2 of the championship series? We did one of these in the pre.
Yeah, and you've still got that smug look on your face.
I do, because I know what's been building. And now, to be honest, what I knew back then compared to like what I know now, like it's pivoted a little bit, but there's been very strategic reasons to all of this, the way it's happening. Scott Roth and co. have done a very good job of building this roster. Starts with Taron Armstrong, bringing Will Magnay back. Love the David Johnson re-signing. I think that's great. We saw what he could do before the calf injury derailed his season. I mean, he is a star-studded talent. The Dakota Matthias signing is a very, very strong one because I don't think we saw the best of him last year. I know he got ruled out.
We started to a little bit, didn't
with the
we?
season with the shoulder injury, I believe it was. But this is a guy, a pure shooter. And you got to think about, there's so many reasons to be excited about this signing. He's not going to be one of the most expensive imports in the league. There's no doubt about that. But a guy who's going to bet on himself too to come back and have a really big year. You cannot leave this guy when he's on the floor.
Yep.
Regardless of whether he's shot 0 for 10 in the game prior to that, he is just that well renowned as a shooter. I like the size that he has, but alongside Taron Armstrong, to have 2 knockdown shooters like that, you throw Majuk Deng out there as well. There's a lot of reasons to be excited to be a Tassie fan, and part of that Dakota Matthias signing now, there's strategic reasons to it outside of the basketball landscape.
Dakota Matthias is a relatively cheap import, relative to some of his peers, which means that theoretically you have a chunk of money that has remained open. And is that a Bryce Hamilton sized chunk of money? That's what we are all looking at when we see this Dakota Matthias signing. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about how Milton Doyle was someone who the team was targeting. Milton Doyle, based on his resume, is a more expensive import. So if you get him, then it limits you with what you can do with that final import spot. If you get someone like Dakota Matthias, who isn't the same player that Milton Doyle is, but has an elite skill in that he is a no-lead shooter. And there is value in having a no-lead shooter. There's a reason why the 36ers brought John Jenkins back, because you can't help off John Jenkins one bit, because a three-pointer is a layup for these guys. So bringing that guy in, which we spoke about, put shooting around Taron Armstrong, they went and did that. There is a theoretical Bryce Hamilton-sized chunk of money there for the team to pursue if and when they have a desire to do such a thing.
Very, very interesting. We'll watch that space. But well done to the Jack Jumpers. This is a very, very good roster that they are assembling for this season. Paddy Mills, Olgun. We're very happy for Paddy that he's doing some great things overseas at the moment and putting up some wonderful numbers. But is he playing too well, perhaps, for an NBL return next season?
Yeah, look, part of this is him playing quite well at Tenerife, and then people and teams around world basketball putting value in that, including EuroLeague teams. I've heard of multiple EuroLeague teams that were prepared to offer Paddy Mills. And then it's just what he wants personally, what he thinks is best for his career. All of those things combined, as we spoke, we were the first to speak about the Perth Wildcats having an interest in Paddy Mills, and they engaged with Paddy Mills. It sounds like that's now off the table. Yep. And the Wildcats have now pivoted to finding an import point guard to round out the core of their roster. So while Mills was not, it wasn't just a fever dream. This wasn't just something that was only hopeful. There were real meaningful talks here, but it does seem like Paddy Mills will be going a different direction as he looks to prolong his career. And the Wildcats, it's full steam ahead with finding the best import point guard they can find.
And we speak of this in the coaching landscape. The basketball world changes very quickly. And at the time, and the Perth Wildcats, when we were speaking to them, they had those conversations. Those are real conversations because nobody knew. I mean, Paddy would have known because Paddy has the utmost belief in himself, and I think we all do, is one of the Australian greats we've ever seen. Yep. To see what the last couple of months would have entailed for him over in Europe. And he's been playing unbelievably well, aging like a fine wine. And with that becomes more doors, more opportunities. So it's a little flattening. Because we really thought at one point that it was going to happen. We know he's linked to the Brisbane Bullets as well. Little conversations there. Teams do their due diligence every year, it seems.
So to the Cairns Taipans, who only a couple of weeks ago on this show we were putting up their depth chart and there were two names. Now all of a sudden, things are starting to take shape. They had Sunday Detch for some depth and some experience. They re-sign, Jaylin Galloway for next season. You can start to see it all taking shape for the Snakes.
Yeah, it looks good. And it's something that we've been hot on and just closely monitoring. And again, we wait for all the official things to come before we start to throw in the depth chart. But it's an exciting group anytime you can pair some elite shooting in Rain Smith with, now you've got a veteran mind of Sunday Detch, who is still one of the best defenders in the league, who's been looking for an opportunity, I think.
Better player than what he was last year.
No, I think he's been there for the last couple of years. Yep. Is he hasn't found the right fit. In professional basketball, professional sport, sometimes it's just finding that right fit, and I think that's going to be in Cairns for him for sure. Jack McVeigh, Keanu Pinder. Now, this is a very exciting local cohort. And don't forget, we've talked about it as well, with Luke Paul was the backup point guard, Sean Bruce being there as well. How all these pieces fit together, I think, is going to really be fun to watch. I think they're all going to really help get the best out of each other. Still got to go and nail that import point guard, maybe another import going from there. A couple bit more security pieces outside of that, because it's not going to be the Jaylin Galloway anymore, it doesn't seem. But yeah, there are exciting times in Cairns.
Yeah, we always look at teams that are built. So we look at the 36ers, for example, that a team that their roster is completely full. So we can look at them and we can evaluate what they're potentially going to be. The Taipans, they're not built yet. They don't have two imports. That's going to be two primary players of that team. But when you look at them, they have two marquees, and it looks like they have reasonable depth. And seeing Luke Paul here in Istanbul, there's potential for him to go and make an impact in the NBL too. They have the potential, at the very least, to be a very fun team. But when you add two imports to the mix in a team with two marquees, and keep in mind who those marquees are. They're two front court players, I think two dynamic, electric sort of scoring players, an athlete in Keanu Pinder, an elite scorer shooter in Jack McVeigh. They're building something there that I think has the top end talent that is as good as it gets in Cairns over the past couple of seasons, and the depth that I think is as good as Cairns has had over the past few seasons as well. I think Jaylin Galloway, we're still waiting for that full-blown breakout year. Will it be this season? And if it is, what does that do to Cairns' floor and their ceiling? Again, they're doing something fascinating up in Cairns.
The import conversation, Pete, as you say, is a really, really important one for them, because we saw last season with Cairns, things didn't work out with their imports. Some of it was out of their control, and it derailed most of their season.
Yeah, it's interesting because normally if you rewind 4 or 5 years ago, up until last year, they normally nail their imports. They normally do such a good job of recruiting their imports that other teams around the league just wait and say, can we pay more for that guy after that season? And they normally try and go and poach one. But last year, obviously, it didn't work out. Admiral Schofield, it didn't work out for whatever reason. We know he's carrying a little bit of an injury. I thought Andrew Andrews was okay. I thought he came on and really showed a whole lot of promise. Marcus Lee was not the player that they needed to play 30 minutes a game with the Wardenberg injury. So now those imports, you don't want to rush. I still feel like talking to the Taipans, we talk about Summer League. I don't know if that's where they'll do their shopping. I think they'll try and do something elsewhere rather than just trying to get a splash out of that and a little bit more depth. But yeah, it's going to come down to those imports because you've got arguably the best local front court in the league. I mean, a lot of people go and get an import in one of those spots. You've got Perth, you've got import Doolittle, JLA, but Tassie, you've got Magnay and Bannon. You've got McVeigh and Keanu Pinder. This is a whole lot of reasons to be fun.
Will they look to the college system again? Because Adam Ford does have a history of grabbing young guys out of college and giving them an opportunity.
When you think about who's coming out of college, who could potentially make an impact in the NBL, all of the ones that I think we would consider, and they're exhausting the NBA pathway. So they'll all be playing summer league. You look at players like Anthony Delorso, Oscar Clough. These guys, they're looking to play in the NBA, whether it's as a two-way player or otherwise. So they will exhaust that. Will it get to a point where it's too late to sign those guys potentially? Will there be interest from across world basketball in those guys? Without question. So while there will always be interest from Adam Ford in those sorts of players, it does feel like the outstanding college players, as in the remaining college players who are unsigned, they'll exhaust the NBA pathway before anything else, and then may it become too late for them to join the NBL potentially.
The one that I was alluding to was the last episode, Oscar Clough, right? That was the one that was closely linked to the Cairns Taipans. As Olgun said, it seems like that NBA really trying to exhaust that pathway first. And I don't feel like Cairns will be in the position. There's not too many backup local bigs left. So if you try and say, hey, we'll wait and see till the last minute of what you want to do, then you're going to end up with no insurance at all in that position. So a decision will have to be made soon on whether we just say, you know what, do that. Maybe we'll come back and do this next season and go again.
The last of our teams to recap some news. We haven't had a lot from Illawarra or Southeast Melbourne or New Zealand in the last 10 days or so. So for those supporters, that's why we haven't got a lot to offer you at this point in time.
I see it all from Illawarra fans. They've been largely done. They've got a couple of import spots to go, and they're going to be very patient in what imports they get there. We know they were having conversations to a couple of marquee guys. We hear a couple of names. I think it was way back I mentioned I heard a name. I don't think that's going to happen right now. So until something is there, we're not going to get your hopes up. We're just waiting to see what the Illawarra Hawks do.
Yeah, they're largely built, most of those teams.
And it's a good reason to be excited. That's a core that won a championship.
Absolutely.
So they're just being patient.
Bullets, on the other hand, Olgun, still got a lot of work to do in terms of constructing their roster. Last episode, you alluded to Arnis Velichka. That deal has now been done. In fact, it was done the day after we recorded the last episode.
It was done the day after. Everyone in Brisbane is so excited about this. I spoke with Velichka's camp. They're excited about this. The opportunity to go and play under Will Weaver in the NBL in a city like Brisbane, that's something that excites them. This isn't a path that's traveled often by European players, especially high-level ones like Velichka, but they're excited for it, and I'm curious what he looks like in the NBL. He has EuroLeague outs in that deal, so I'll stress that. There's potential for that to happen, but I think there's confidence that he will be in Brisbane. What this sort of player looks like, I mentioned the Will McDowell-White type. This is someone who led the Euro Cup in assists. This is an extremely high-level player out of Lithuania. So what he looks like, how the team operates, I'm intrigued by. There were some NBA-type names I heard for that 4th spot. It sounds like they're pivoting to potentially some other names. Again, potentially some other NBA names. But it sounds like Will Weaver has been going through and doing his due diligence on who they're going to have at that 4th spot. It feels like they're treating that with a substantial level of significance. They want to make sure they nail that.
And I think he's gone about it the right way, Will Weaver. He's been very patient in this approach and said, hey, let's get the bookends of our team first. Let's get the bookends sorted. So we've got Velichka locked into the point guard. We already had Tyro Harrison, Jacob Holt down low. So now that we have that, we have a fun pairing to then put some other pieces around. And they need some shooting. They need some other playmakers and creators. So being patient and making sure that they have enough in that regard. Tyro Harrison's one of the best big men in the competition. Velichka, I think, is going to be a really, really fun prospect. You talk about the high IQ, the way that he plays. He's going to be a lot bigger than a lot of other point guards out there as well. We haven't seen this for a long time coming in. He mentioned Will McDowell-White. We see similar aspects of like Taron Armstrong, who's a different part of his career, a much different build. But I think Velichka, I think fans are going to love what he brings because it's not going to be the Kendrick Davis, Bryce Cotton type performances, but he's going to be able to control games a lot differently than we've seen from other point guards.
The depth chart that we've seen, as you mentioned, Olgun, has gaps at the 2 and the 4. I think, to your point, history would say in this league in the last decade, if you haven't got a really good 4-man, then you're up against it from the start.
You know what? I don't know if I completely subscribe to that in the same way that you do. You think of the last 5 champions, Mason Peatling was the starting 4-man for 2 of those. So you can get by, but when you do have that starting 4-man, you can see how that guy is able to impose himself on other teams. And even if it's not a high-level scoring 4-man, you think of some of the ones over the last few seasons. I think of Gary Clark. I think of Anthony Lamb. I think of Jarrell Brantley, Xavier Cooks. But the guys who do it on the other end, I think are just as important. So John Brown III, but Xavier Cooks, Jarrell Brantley, they're 2 names that I think of as 2 high-level 4-men who aren't just elite scorers. Think of like a Mitch Creek type, but they're able to defend multiple positions. They're always in the right spots. They're connectors. I think being high level and being high IQ at that 4 spot, I think is important, not just in the NBL, but in the FIBA game in general, but particularly how Australians play within the FIBA game. A high IQ 4 is maybe more important than just in a vacuum high level 4. I think that's my feel on it.
So a couple before we finish up. First and foremost, Summer League. Olgun, you mentioned that you're about to jump on a plane very shortly and head over to the States. We'll get together next week and do this in greater detail. But just as a starting point, who should we be looking out for so far?
Let's keep an eye on some of the names that we are familiar with. So Flynn Cameron, Adelaide 36ers, reigning most improved player. He'll be joining the Portland Trailblazers for the NBA Summer League. So that's an exciting opportunity for him. Lachlan Olbrick, former NBL player, NBL champion. His qualifying offer wasn't tendered by the Chicago Bulls, so he became effectively a free agent. He's joining the Golden State Warriors, the NBA Summer League. So can he get his foot back in the door from an NBA standpoint? Luke Travers has long been with the Cleveland Cavaliers since being drafted by the Cavs in 2022. He's been part of that franchise. He was traded in a deal in the middle of last season, and so he had to find a new team. He's with the Milwaukee Bucks. Look at Oscar Clough with the Houston Rockets. Look at Anthony Del Orso with the Sacramento Kings. There are Australians scattered everywhere. Will there be the volume that we're used to seeing over the last few seasons? Doesn't feel like it, but it does feel like we'll have high-impact Australians scattered across not just Las Vegas, but Utah, Sacramento, but particularly Las Vegas over Summer League.
Yeah, it'll be a bit quieter on that front. I'm not going this year, Jack. I'm staying home.
Really?
Well, with the second little one, I thought it was a bit unfair to leave the missus on her own for 2 weeks. We're going back to the States later in the year, so I'll miss it for that point. We'll
I think the Las Vegas clubs and pubs will certainly miss your presence too.
Yeah, no, definitely. But no, I think that it's a quieter front on that front in terms of playing. A couple of teams won't have, in terms of signing, trying to go there shopping. A couple of teams won't be there at all. Teams whose rosters are largely complete. Even though Adelaide's is complete, they'll be there. Yep. Matt Weston will still be over there. So we'll get some people, we'll have some people on the ground to catch up with teams who are shopping. Melbourne United need 3 imports. Brisbane need a couple. New Zealand need a couple. But outside of that, yeah, it does seem a little bit more on the quiet front, but we'll make sure we bring plenty your way. We'll catch up with Olgun. We've got some other people there on the ground as well.
More on that next week on NBL Marketplace, so keep your eyes peeled on that one. Let's finish off with spending, because this is the one that just fascinates everyone. And spends have come out last week. News Corp have reported. Olgun, you've also reported on spends for both teams and individuals. What are our takeaways from all of this?
The big takeaway is how much teams are spending. The salary cap grew by 7%. When the salary cap rises, the 7% is the cap in which it's able to grow. And the reason it grew so much is because it's a reflection of the spending. So we had, according to my numbers, 3 teams that were closer to spending $5 million than who were spending $4 million. Keep in mind that the salary cap is around $2 million.
Yeah.
So these teams were willing to go significantly over the cap. Obviously, it's a soft cap. They're willing to dip into the luxury tax in a significant way. The Perth Wildcats, while they weren't able to retain Bryce Cotton, and Bryce Cotton as an import has such a substantial hit on your cap, they weren't able to retain him. And then in their mind, it was because it cost them so much money, because their luxury tax bill is so high, but they still ended up being, according to my numbers, the number one cash spend team in the league, around 4.8 million. And keep in mind that I've checked these numbers with multiple sources, within teams, outside of teams. I have a high level of confidence in my numbers. They spent around 4.8 million signing Mason Jones, and then cutting him and paying out a chunk of that contract. That hurt them, obviously. The Sydney Kings, according to my numbers, were second. I think the Sydney Kings would have been third, but from what I understand, they paid out Kendrick Davis's MVP bonus. Now, they didn't have to do that. That was a good faith effort from them, saying, you got really close in the MVP vote. You're our MVP, obviously. We're going to pay you that bonus. Not only did he get that bonus, but the luxury tax that it accrues, because you're adding that to his cap spend, that jumped them up. It was a bonus that hovers around closer to 100 grand, but it ended up costing about 180 grand. That cost them a lot of money. And then the Adelaide 36ers are interesting too, because if Bryce Cotton remains an American, their cash spend would have been closer to 6 million than it would be to 5 million. They'd be in that 5.5 million and more mark. But because Bryce Cotton was marquee, his contract, which hits around $1.3 million, it hits the cap at around $250,000 instead. And so by having that cap hit for Bryce Cotton, they saved around $700,000 or $800,000. Grant Kelly personally saved that much in cap spend. So those are the top three teams. And then the other one is the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, who were up there in cap spend, or a middling team in cap spend, but they were a top 4 team in the NBL. They came third just by a whisker. They were 9th in cash spend. So that is the team that I point to as doing the most with the least amount of money. They didn't spend that much, but they were still high achievers relative to how much they spent.
And let's be clear, talent costs money. So, I mean, this is why people always say, oh, this team, they're spending. Yes, you want to win. The good players aren't cheap. And that's why Adelaide 36ers, they bring in Bryce Cotton. You pay Kendrick Davis now, that this new deal that puts him in the $1 million bracket. We're expecting PJC to be in that company again this year as well. The great talent who can get poached overseas for much more money, you've got to pay them. But also, it's probably worth doing in a different show completely to people to understand what Olgun's saying, how it all works. Each game, you can have 4 total of imports and marquees. You can designate that if someone's injured, like Bulkwell, for instance.
He's a great example.
Who would have been a marquee player up until he gets injured. You can move that designation once he gets injured, and that money does not hit your cap spend. The rules are there to be taken advantage of in the right way to help maximize how much talent you can get and how your best chance to go and win a championship. It's not just looking at saying, oh, they spent the most, they're taking the ridiculous amount of going over. It's a soft cap. It's not a hard cap. If you use the rules to your advantage, good things should happen. You
can check it all out at nbl.com.au. Of course, you can follow Olgun on social media and on Twitter as well. When do you fly, Olgun?
I fly later today, heading to the States just to prime myself for Summer League in early July. So I'm excited for that. But Istanbul has been terrific. It's been awesome out here, just chatting with the coaches. Greg Vanderjak's done a great job with the Australian Crocs out here. It looks like they look like a team that has the potential to go far. They smashed a Serbia team that was projected to be quite good. So I've enjoyed my time in Istanbul, but off to America I go.
That's a 5-star hotel I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. That's the best Wi-Fi available, judging from how we've been able to do this show. Pete, for you and I, this show will be like the flu game for us. We've managed to get through, but only just.
Well, I'm on the back end of it. It seems like you're right in the middle of the thick of it. But we've got plenty to talk about, and we need to bring it to the people. Massive thanks to Paywise. They bring you this show each and every episode. Salary packaging and novated leasing. A massive thanks to them. Thanks to Olgun. Thanks to Pete. Thanks to you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.